I'm Rebecca, 26 female. I live in a small but comfortable apartment that I pay for myself, a quiet sanctuary from the noise of the city and, more often than not, the noise of my own family. By day, I'm a financial analyst, a job that suits my detail-oriented and logical nature perfectly. Numbers don't lie, which is a stability I've come to cherish. This story is about how I used that logic to untangle myself from a family that saw my success not as something to celebrate, but as a resource to be exploited. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The late afternoon sun streamed through the bay windows of my parents' house, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The backyard was filled with the low hum of polite conversation, the clinking of glasses, and the smell of my mom's famous barbecue. It was my graduation party, a celebration of the master's degree in finance I had just spent 2 grueling years earning. I had worked full-time while studying, sacrificing weekends and social events, all for this piece of paper that represented freedom and a future I was building brick by brick. My dad, Mark, was holding court by the grill, a spatula in one hand and a beer in the other. He was a man who loved being the center of attention, a trait my brother, Ethan, had inherited in spades. Ethan, a year older than me, was circulating through the small crowd of family, friends, and relatives, his smile a little too wide, his laughter a little too loud. He had a way of making every event about himself, and today was no exception. He was dressed in a designer shirt that probably cost more than my textbooks for a semester, talking animatedly about his latest grand venture, a high-end, farm-to-table bistro he planned to open downtown. I tried to focus on the positives. My Aunt Susan, my mom's sister, gave me a hug that felt like it could mend broken bones. "I am so incredibly proud of you, Becca," she whispered, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "You earned this, every bit of it." Susan was a psychologist, and she had a way of seeing right through the family's carefully constructed facade. She saw me, not as a supporting character in the Ethan and Mark show, but as my own person. The day wore on, a pleasant blur of congratulations and small talk. I accepted compliments gracefully, answered questions about my new job at a prestigious investment firm, and tried to ignore the subtle, familiar feeling of being overshadowed. Every conversation seemed to pivot back to Ethan. "Oh, Rebecca, that's wonderful. Did you hear Ethan is opening a restaurant? A master's degree? Very nice. You know, Ethan is about to become the town's next great restaurateur." It was as if my concrete achievement was somehow less real, less exciting than my brother's hypothetical dream. As evening approached and the string lights in the garden blinked on, my dad tapped a knife against his glass, calling for everyone's attention. My stomach clenched. I knew what was coming. Speeches. And in my family, speeches were a competitive sport. "I just want to say a few words," my dad began, beaming. "We are so proud of our kids, both of them." He gave a nod in my direction, a perfunctory gesture before his gaze landed squarely on Ethan. Ethan, with his incredible vision and entrepreneurial spirit, is about to take the culinary world by storm. We know he's going to be a massive success. The crowd applauded warmly. Ethan took a theatrical bow. Then my dad turned to me. "And Rebecca, well, she's always been the book-smart one. She finished her program, and we're all very happy for her." The praise felt hollow, like an appetizer before the main course. Then it was Ethan's turn. He raised his champagne flute, a smirk playing on his lips. He walked to the center of the patio, his movements confident and practiced. "To my little sister, Rebecca," he started, and for a fleeting moment I allowed myself to hope he would say something kind. That hope was a fool's errand. "I've got to hand it to you. I never thought you'd actually finish. All those nights with your head in a book. Crazy you're finally done?" He paused, letting the backhanded compliment hang in the air. The guests chuckled uncertainly. "Seriously, though," he continued, his voice dripping with condescension, "congratulations. You'll probably end up jobless anyway in this economy, but hey, at least you have a fancy piece of paper to frame." A wave of stunned silence washed over the patio, quickly broken by a loud, booming laugh. It was my dad. He clapped Ethan on the back, chuckling as if his son had just told the world's most clever joke. "That's my boy," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Always the realist." The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot flush that crawled up my neck and settled in my seat. Heeks, I looked around the yard. A few people looked uncomfortable, staring into their drinks. My Aunt Susan was glaring at Ethan with an intensity that could curdle milk. But no one said anything. No one defended me. My mother offered a weak, placating smile from the sidelines, her silent plea for me to just let it go, to not make a scene. I said nothing. I didn't cry or scream or throw my drink in his face, though I wanted to. Instead, a strange, cold calm settled over me. I simply smiled a tight, empty smile, raised my own glass, and said, "Thanks for the vote of confidence, Ethan." The party continued as if nothing had happened. The music came back on, conversations resumed, and the moment was glossed over. But for me, everything had shifted. That toast wasn't just an insult, it was a clarification. It was the final, undeniable confirmation of what I had always known deep down. In their eyes, my role was to be the responsible, stable, background character. My achievements were cute little milestones, but Ethan's dreams were the main event. My purpose in their minds was to be the safety net. And as I stood there, smiling my hollow smile, I remembered the thick stack of loan documents sitting on my desk at home, the ones waiting for my signature. The ones where I, with my brand new degree, my spotless credit, and my high-paying job offer, was listed as the co-signer for Ethan's restaurant. In that moment, surrounded by my smiling, dismissive family, a new plan began to form. A plan that started with a single, quiet click of a button. The conversation about the loan had happened 3 weeks before the party. It had been framed not as a request, but as a foregone conclusion. I was at my parents' house for our mandatory Sunday dinner when my dad and Ethan cornered me in the kitchen. My mom was conveniently busy in the garden, a tactic she often employed when she sensed a confrontation brewing. "Becca, honey, we need to talk to you about something important," my dad began, using the paternal, slightly condescending tone he reserved for serious matters. He leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. It was his power stance. Ethan, ever the showman, unrolled a set of architectural drawings across the kitchen island, weighing them down with a salt shaker and a bowl of fruit. "Becca, behold, the gilded fork," he announced with a grand sweep of his hand. The drawings depicted a chic, modern restaurant with exposed brick, Edison bulb lighting, and an open kitchen. It looked expensive. "It's a revolutionary concept," Ethan explained, his eyes shining with unearned confidence. "Locally sourced, sustainable, avant-garde cuisine. It's going to be the hottest spot in the city. The investors are practically lining up, but to secure the prime location downtown, I need to get the primary business loan approved within the next month." I studied the plans. As a financial analyst, my brain immediately started running the numbers, calculating overhead, projecting revenue, and assessing risk. The restaurant industry was notoriously brutal, with a failure rate of over 60% in the first 3 years. Ethan had no professional culinary training and had never managed a business before. His work history was a string of short-lived projects funded by my father that never quite panned out. A t-shirt printing business, a dropshipping website, a podcast about becoming an influencer. All had fizzled out due to his lack of follow-through. "This looks very ambitious, Ethan," I said carefully, trying to keep my tone neutral. "What's your business plan look like? Have you factored in staffing costs, marketing, permits, a 6-month operating reserve?" Ethan waved a dismissive hand. Details. That's what I'll hire people for. I'm the vision guy." My dad stepped in, placing a hand on my shoulder. "That's where you come in, sweetie. The bank loves the idea, but they're being sticky about Ethan's credit history. You know, a few little hiccups from his college days." I knew all about the hiccups. A maxed-out credit card he'd forgotten about, which my dad had quietly paid off. A car repossession. A series of unpaid utility bills. Ethan's financial record was a disaster zone. He had the credit score of a ghost. "They need a cosigner," my dad said, finally getting to the point. "Someone with a stable income and a strong credit profile, someone like you." It felt like a punch to the gut. They weren't asking, they were telling. The assumption was that of course I would do it. I was the responsible one, the one with the perfect credit score I had painstakingly built since I was 18. I was the one with the signed contract for a high-paying job. My financial security was apparently a family resource to be deployed for the sake of Ethan's latest whim. "Dad, co-signing on a business loan of that size is a huge risk," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "If the restaurant fails, I would be legally responsible for the entire debt. It could ruin me financially. It could prevent me from ever buying a house or getting a loan for myself." "Don't be so dramatic, Rebecca," Ethan scoffed. "The Gilded Fork isn't going to fail, it's a guaranteed success. This isn't a risk, it's an investment in your brother's future, in the family's future." "He's right," my dad added, his voice hardening slightly. "This is what families do for each other. You have a great job lined up. You can easily afford it if, in the very, very unlikely event something goes wrong. We've always supported you, your education." He left the rest of the sentence hanging in the air, the implication clear. "We paid for your college, so you owe us." It was a classic guilt trip, one they had mastered over the years. The truth was they had contributed, but I had also worked 2 jobs and taken out my own student loans to cover the majority of my undergraduate costs, loans I was still diligently paying off. My master's degree was entirely self-funded through scholarships and the salary from my full-time job. Their support had always been conditional, a debt to be called in when it suited them. I felt trapped. Arguing with them was like arguing with a brick wall. Any pushback from me would be framed as me being selfish, ungrateful, and unsupportive. They would paint me as the villain who was standing in the way of my brother's dreams. I looked from my dad's expectant face to my brother's entitled smirk, and I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me. It was easier, I thought, to just agree and hope for the best. "Okay," I said, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. "I'll look at the paperwork." "That's my girl," my dad boomed, clapping me on the shoulder so hard I stumbled. Ethan gave me a triumphant grin. "You won't regret this, sis. When the restaurant is a hit, I'll even name a salad after you." The paperwork arrived a week later. It was a massive digital file from the bank, detailing a $350,000 business loan. My name was already typed into the box for the cosigner. All it needed was my digital signature. I had filled out the initial application online with Ethan, my mouse hovering over the final, submit button for days. The bank needed my final consent after they had reviewed Ethan's side of the application. I told my family I was just reviewing the terms and conditions, a plausible delay tactic given my profession. Every time they asked, I told them I was waiting for the final loan agreement from the bank, which wasn't entirely a lie. I needed to see the final, binding document before I signed. Now, sitting in my car in the driveway after the graduation party, Ethan's cruel words echoing in my ears, the full weight of that betrayal crashed down on me. It wasn't just a favor. It was an expectation. It wasn't about supporting my brother. It was about me providing a safety net for his inevitable failure, a financial cushion built from my hard work, my discipline, and my sacrifices. My dad's chuckle was the final piece of the puzzle. They didn't just expect me to do it, they felt entitled to it. They saw my success not as my own, but as an asset for them to leverage. His toast wasn't just a mean-spirited joke, it was a Freudian slip, revealing exactly how little he thought of my future compared to Ethan's. I was the backup plan, and I was done playing my part. I drove home from the party in a daze, the cheerful music on the radio sounding jarring and offensive. The cold, hard knot of anger in my stomach had solidified into something else: resolve. When I got back to my apartment, I didn't bother changing out of my dress. I walked straight to my small home office, the one I had spent so many late nights in, studying for the exams that had earned me the degree they had just so casually belittled. I opened my laptop, the screen illuminating my face in the darkroom. The email from the bank was sitting in my inbox, flagged and unread. The subject line was "Action Required, Loan Application for the Gilded Fork." I had been putting off opening the final version of the loan agreement, partly out of dread and partly out of a foolish hope that something might change. Now, I clicked it open with a sense of grim purpose. The document was dense, page after page of legal and financial jargon that would make most people's eyes glaze over. But this was my world. This was what I had trained for 2 years to understand. I read through every line, every clause, every subsection, not as a reluctant sister, but as a financial analyst assessing a high-risk asset. The terms were even worse than I had anticipated. The interest rate was predatory, a clear reflection of the bank's lack of confidence in Ethan as the primary borrower. It was a variable rate, tied to the prime rate, which meant the payments could skyrocket with the economy. But the most horrifying part was the collateral clause. To secure a loan of this size for a first-time business owner with a terrible credit history, the bank required significant collateral. I scrolled down to Schedule A, List of Pledged Assets, and my blood ran cold. Listed there alongside Ethan's 10-year-old sports car, worth a fraction of what he owed on it, were my assets. My $401K from the job I had just left. My investment portfolio, which I had carefully built since my first internship. Even my own car, which was fully paid off. It was all there, itemized and valued. I had provided this information during the initial application, believing it was a standard part of a financial assessment. I never imagined they would list it all as collateral to be seized in the event of a default. How had they even gotten this information? I remembered Ethan asking me to send him a summary of my financial health to show the loan officer I was a viable cosigner. I, naively, had sent him a password-protected document with my account statements, trusting that it was a formality. He must have given the entire file to the bank. They had used my financial prudence against me, turning my hard-earned security into the primary guarantee for Ethan's reckless gamble. If the restaurant went under, they wouldn't just come after my income, they would liquidate my entire net worth. Everything I had worked for would be gone. I felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't co-signing, this was a financial execution. My dad, an insurance broker who dealt with contracts and risk assessment daily, would have understood the implications of this. He had to have seen these terms. The thought that he had seen this, understood it, and still pushed me to sign was a deeper betrayal than any mean-spirited toast. He wasn't just willing to risk my future, he was actively offering it up on a platter to fund his son's fantasy. My mind raced, replaying conversations, looking for clues I had missed. I remembered my dad saying, "The bank just needs to see you're committed." I remembered Ethan brushing off my questions about the business plan, saying, "Dad's guy at the bank is handling the details." It was all a setup. They had counted on me being too intimidated by the fine print, too trusting of them, or too pressured by the family first mantra to read the agreement properly. They had used my own financial literacy as a tool against me, assuming I would be the good daughter and just sign where I was told. That's when I noticed a small detail in the application portal. The bank system had a log of all activity on the account. I could see every login, every document upload, every message exchange between the applicant and the loan officer. Curiosity overriding my anger, I clicked on the message history. It was a series of emails between Ethan and the loan officer, a man named Mr. Henderson. Most of it was standard procedure. But then I saw a message chain from a week ago with the subject line regarding the cosigner. Ethan had written, "Mr. Henderson just wanted to confirm that my sister, Rebecca, is fully on board. She's a financial whiz, just got her master's, and she sees this as a fantastic family investment. She has complete faith in the business." Mr. Henderson's reply was professional, but telling. "Thank you, Ethan. That is good to hear. As discussed, given your limited personal assets and credit history, her full backing and the collateralization of her assets are the primary factors enabling the bank to move forward with this offer. Her financial stability is the sole pillar upon which this loan is built. Please ensure she is fully aware of the terms outlined in Section 7B regarding asset seizure upon default. The sole pillar. My stomach twisted into a tighter knot. I wasn't a partner in this venture. I was the foundation, designed to be underwater and out of sight, bearing all the weight and getting none of the credit. And if the structure came crashing down, I would be the first thing to be crushed. The final email in the chain was from Ethan, sent just 2 days before my graduation party. No worries at all, Henderson. My sister knows what family is all about. She'll sign. She always comes through. She always comes through. The arrogance, the absolute certainty of my compliance was staggering. It laid bare the truth of my entire life, my entire role in the family. I was the reliable one, the responsible one, the one who cleaned up messes and smoothed things over. I was the one who could be counted on to sacrifice my own needs for the sake of the family, which really just meant for the sake of Ethan. That night, there was no more doubt, no more hesitation. This wasn't about a restaurant anymore. This was about my life. They hadn't just asked for a signature, they had tried to steal my future. And as I sat there in the dark, the damning words on the screen burning into my memory, I knew that my silence at the party was over. The time for being the good daughter was officially, irrevocably done. The next morning, I woke up with a chilling sense of clarity. The anger from the night before had cooled into a steely resolve. I called in sick to my new job, something I had never done before, claiming a sudden migraine. The truth was, I needed the day. I needed to do what I did best: research, analysis, and due diligence. I was going to turn my professional skills on my own family. My first step was to understand the full scope of Ethan's financial incompetence. I knew about the hiccups my dad had mentioned, but I suspected they were just the tip of the iceberg. I started with a simple, legal credit check service. As a potential cosigner, I was within my rights to request a detailed report on the primary borrower, and I had already obtained Ethan's consent for this during the initial application phase. I had just never bothered to run the full report myself, trusting the bank's underwriters. That was a mistake I wouldn't make again. I paid for the most comprehensive report available and waited. When the file downloaded, it was worse than I could have imagined. It was a 15-page horror story of financial irresponsibility. There were more than just a few late payments. There were accounts in collections, old utility bills, a gym membership, even a mobile phone contract. There were multiple credit cards maxed out and carrying huge balances, with interest payments that were likely crippling. The car repossession was there, but so was a failed small claims court judgment against him from a former roommate over unpaid rent. His official credit score was abysmal. He was in the very poor category, a range that screamed high risk to any legitimate lender. No bank would ever give him a loan for $3,500, let alone $350,000, without a cosigner who was practically signing their own life away. This report was a testament not just to his recklessness, but to my father's enablement. Mark had clearly been bailing Ethan out for years, throwing money at his problems without ever forcing him to face the consequences. This restaurant wasn't a business venture. It was the next, most expensive bailout. But I wasn't done. A credit report showed his history with debt, but I wanted to understand his history with business. I started digging into the so-called projects he had started over the years. I used state business registration databases and old social media posts to piece together a timeline. First was the t-shirt company, Withdrew, he started in college. I found the defunct business registration. It had been dissolved by the state for failure to pay annual taxes. I also found an online forum of a local arts festival where 2 artists complained that Withdrew had used their designs without permission or payment. Next was the dropshipping website that sold novelty pet supplies. I found the abandoned Shopify store. The few customer reviews were scathing, all citing the same issues: orders that never arrived, no customer service response, and products that were cheap knockoffs of what was advertised. He had likely taken the money and never bothered to fulfill the orders. Then there was the influencer podcast. He had produced exactly 3 episodes before giving up. The theme was financial freedom for millennials, a topic so ironic it would have been funny if it weren't my own finances on the line. Each venture followed the same pattern: a burst of initial enthusiasm, a flashy announcement, a complete lack of a viable business plan, and then a quiet fizzle when the actual work began. He wasn't an entrepreneur. He was a child playing dress-up, and my dad was the indulgent parent buying him ever more expensive costumes. My investigation led me to the most crucial piece of the puzzle: the restaurant's business plan. Ethan had been cagey about showing it to me, claiming it was a work in progress. But I knew he had to have submitted something to the bank. In the application portal, under Uploaded Documents, there it was: Gilded Fork Business Plan Final, PDF. I downloaded it, my heart pounding. As I read, my jaw dropped. It was a masterpiece of delusion. The financial projections were pure fantasy. He projected the restaurant would be profitable within the first 6 months, an almost unheard-of achievement in the industry. His revenue estimates were based on being fully booked every single night of the week, with an average customer spend that was double the norm for our city. His cost analysis was even more laughable. He had drastically underestimated the cost of everything: high-quality ingredients, experienced chefs and staff, liquor licenses, insurance, and marketing. There was no contingency fund, no emergency reserve. According to his own numbers, the business would be out of cash in less than a month if they hit even a minor snag. It wasn't a business plan, it was a wish list written by someone with no grasp of reality. And the loan officer, Mr. Henderson, must have known it. So why would the bank approve it? The answer was on the final page, the section on loan security. The plan heavily emphasized the strength and commitment of the cosigner. It mentioned my new job, my salary, which Ethan had inflated by 20%, my master's degree, and my significant personal assets. The truth hit me with the force of a physical blow. The bank wasn't investing in Ethan's restaurant. They didn't care if the Gilded Fork ever served a single meal. They were investing in me. They saw a no-lose situation. Either, by some miracle, the restaurant succeeded and they got their money back with high interest, or, as was far more likely, it failed and they could legally seize my entire life savings. My father and brother hadn't just offered me up as a safety net. They had sold me to the bank as a guaranteed, risk-free asset. My final call of the day was to my Aunt Susan. I needed an anchor, someone outside the toxic bubble of my immediate family. I explained everything in a calm, measured voice: the toast, the loan terms, the collateral, the credit report, the joke of a business plan. She listened patiently, without interrupting. When I was done, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Rebecca," she finally said, her voice soft but firm, "I am so sorry. I am sorry they put you in this position, and I am sorry that I haven't done more to stop this pattern over the years. Your father," he sees Ethan as a reflection of himself, a second chance at a kind of flashy success he never had. "And you've always been so capable, so responsible, that it's been easy for them to take it for granted." "What do I do, Susan?" I asked, my voice cracking for the first time that day. "You already know what you have to do," she said gently. "You are not responsible for your brother's dreams, and you are certainly not responsible for his failures. Your only responsibility here is to protect yourself. They have shown you who they are. You need to believe them." Her words were the final piece of validation I needed. My investigation was complete. I had the facts, the evidence, and the cold, hard numbers. And now I had a plan. My plan wasn't about fireworks or a dramatic confrontation, at least not at first. My world was one of numbers, contracts, and quiet, deliberate actions. A grand, emotional outburst would only give them ammunition to paint me as hysterical or irrational. Revenge, I decided, was a dish best served coldly, efficiently, and with a legally airtight paper trail. The first step was the most crucial. I logged back into the bank's online loan portal. My application as cosigner was still in a pending final signature status. A large orange button at the bottom of the page read "Digitally sign and complete application." Next to it, in small gray text, was a hyperlink, "Withdraw application." My finger hovered over the link for a full minute. This was the point of no return. Clicking this wouldn't just kill the loan, it would detonate a bomb in the middle of my family. The fallout would be immense, but the alternative, signing my name and handing them the keys to my future, was unthinkable. I took a deep breath and clicked. A confirmation box popped up. "Are you sure you wish to withdraw your application as a cosigner for this loan? This action is irreversible." I clicked confirm. The page refreshed. The status now read, "Cosigner application withdrawn." A wave of relief so profound it made me dizzy washed over me. It was done. The immediate threat was neutralized. The bank would automatically send a notification to the primary applicant, Ethan, informing him that the loan could not proceed without a cosigner. The bomb was armed and ticking. But I wasn't just going to let the bank's sterile notification do the talking. I needed to control the narrative. My father and brother were masters of twisting reality, and I knew they would try to spin this as a betrayal, a sudden, emotional act of spite. I needed to frame my decision in the language they understood: business. I spent the next 2 hours drafting an email. I addressed it to both my father and Ethan. The subject line was professional and anodyne, regarding the loan application for the Gilded Fork. The email was my masterpiece. It was devoid of emotion. There were no accusations, no mentions of the hurtful toast or years of feeling overlooked. Instead, it was a formal, systematic takedown of the entire venture, written as if I were a consultant delivering a final report on a bad investment. I started by stating my decision clearly. After a thorough review of the final loan agreement and the associated business plan, I have made the professional decision to withdraw my application as cosigner. This decision is final. Then I laid out my reasoning, point by point, using bulleted lists and financial terminology. Unacceptable risk exposure. I detailed how the collateral clause placed 100% of the risk on my personal assets, which was a non-standard and unacceptable level of exp. Osier for a cosigner. I attached the relevant section of the loan agreement for their reference. Flawed financial projections. I systematically dismantled Ethan's business plan. I compared his revenue projections to industry benchmarks for new restaurants in our city, showing they were inflated by over 200%. I recalculated his operating costs to include realistic figures for staffing, marketing, and inventory, demonstrating that the business would be operating at a significant loss from day one. I concluded that the venture, as planned, was financially unviable and projected to be insolvent within the first fiscal year. High probability of default. I mentioned, in the most neutral terms possible, that the primary borrower's credit history presents a significant obstacle to securing favorable loan terms and indicates a high statistical probability of default. I didn't need to include the credit report. The implication was clear. Conclusion. I ended the email by framing my decision not as a personal one, but as a fiduciary duty to myself. As a financial professional, I cannot in good conscience attach my name and my financial future to an enterprise with such a high likelihood of failure. To do so would be an act of professional and personal negligence. I wish you the best in securing alternative funding. I read the email over a dozen times, editing it until it was as cold and sharp as a surgeon's scalpel. It was unassailable. By refusing to engage emotionally, I was robbing them of their usual weapons: guilt, manipulation, and accusations of being overly sensitive. How could they argue with spreadsheets and market data? How could they call me selfish for making a sound financial decision, the very thing my entire education and career were built upon? Before I hit send, I did one last thing. I forwarded a copy of the email, along with the loan agreement and Ethan's business plan, to my Aunt Susan. I added a short note. Just wanted to keep you in the loop. I suspect things are about to get difficult. It was my insurance policy, ensuring there was one other person in the family who knew the objective, unvarnished truth. Finally, at exactly 10:00 p.m. on the Sunday after my party, I hit send. I closed my laptop, walked into my living room, and poured myself a glass of water. My hand was perfectly steady. There was no panic, no fear, just a profound, liberating sense of calm. I had spent my entire life trying to avoid this confrontation, contorting myself to keep the peace. But now, the war had already been declared at my party. I had just chosen the battlefield. And it was a battlefield where I held every advantage. I had taken their assumptions, that I was just the quiet, compliant, book-smart girl, and used them to set a trap. They wouldn't know what hit them until it was far too late. Now, all I had to do was wait for the explosion. The explosion came sooner than I expected. My phone started ringing at 7:04 a.m. the next morning. It was Ethan. I ignored the call. It rang again immediately. I ignored it. Then a string of text messages began to flood my screen. "What did you do?" "The bank just emailed me. The loan is dead." "Rebecca, answer your phone. You just destroyed my entire future. I can't believe you would do this." "Dad is going to kill you." A grim smile touched my lips. The bank's automated notification had clearly arrived before my email was opened. They were reacting to the effect without yet understanding the cause. Perfect. 10 minutes later, a call came from my dad. I let it go to voicemail. His message was a torrent of fury. "Rebecca Lynn, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but you have created a disaster. Ethan is here, and he's a wreck. You have single-handedly ruined his one big chance. We are coming over to your apartment right now. We are going to fix this." The arrogance was breathtaking. "We are going to fix this." They still thought they had control, that they could bully me into reversing my decision. I took a sip of my coffee and sent a calm, collected text message back to both of them. "I am not available to meet. Please see my email from last night for a full explanation of my professional decision. There is nothing to fix." That, I knew, would send them scurrying to their inboxes. I could almost picture the scene. My father and Ethan, huddled over a screen, their initial rage turning to stunned confusion as they read my cold, analytical breakdown of Ethan's incompetence. The bullet points, the financial jargon, the attached documents, it was a corporate firing squad, and they were completely unprepared for it. The silence that followed my text message lasted for exactly 38 minutes. It was the most peaceful 38 minutes I'd had in weeks. Then came the knock on my apartment door. Not a polite knock, but an insistent, angry banging that echoed through the hallway. I looked through the peephole. It was both of them, my father's face red and contorted with rage, Ethan looking pale and disheveled. I did not open the door. "Rebecca, open this door right now," my father bellowed, his voice muffled. I stayed silent. I had no intention of letting them into my space. This was my sanctuary, and their toxicity was not welcome here. His banging grew louder. "You think you can hide behind a door after what you did, after you stabbed your own brother in the back?" "I read your email," Ethan shouted, his voice cracking with a mixture of rage and desperation. "All that corporate nonsense. You think you're so smart with your fancy degree? This is family, not one of your business deals." This was the moment of truth. I walked to the door and spoke calmly, my voice loud enough to be heard clearly through the wood. "This stopped being about family when you lied to me about the loan terms and listed my life savings as collateral without my full consent. This became a business deal the moment you decided my financial future was disposable." "That's not what happened," my dad yelled back. "It was a formality. We were protecting the family's investment." "Whose investment, Dad?" I called back, my voice steady. "Ethan's investment of your money, or my investment of my entire net worth. You read the terms. You're an insurance broker. You understand risk. You knew exactly what you were asking me to sign." A flicker of something, maybe shame, maybe just frustration at being caught, crossed his face in the peephole. He was silent for a moment. Ethan took over. "You're just jealous." he shrieked, his voice reaching a new, frantic pitch. "You've always been jealous of me. You couldn't stand to see me succeed at something big, something real, while you just sit behind a desk and play with numbers." The accusation was so ludicrous, so completely detached from reality that I almost laughed. "Jealous of what, Ethan?" I asked, my voice dripping with ice. "Your credit score, your long list of failed businesses, your complete inability to take responsibility for your own life? No, I'm not jealous, I'm just done. I'm done being the safety net. I'm done being the responsible one you can all take for granted. My name, my credit, and my money are my own. You are not entitled to them." Suddenly, there was a commotion in the hallway. My next-door neighbor, a large, no-nonsense man named Mr. Henderson, an ironic coincidence, opened his door. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. "You're making a hell of a racket." My father, flustered at being called out by a stranger, stammered, "This is a private family matter." "It stopped being private when you started screaming and banging on doors at 7:30 in the morning," Mr. Henderson said, crossing his burly arms. "Either you leave, or I'm calling building security." Defeated and humiliated, my dad shot one last venomous glare at my door. "This isn't over, Rebecca," he hissed, before grabbing a stunned Ethan by the arm and pulling him toward the elevator. I stayed at the door until I heard the elevator ding and their footsteps disappear. Then, I leaned my forehead against the cool wood, my body trembling with adrenaline. The confrontation had been ugly, but it had been necessary. For the first time, I hadn't backed down. I hadn't tried to keep the peace. I had stood my ground, armed with the truth and a locked door. They had come expecting to find the timid, compliant girl they had always known. Instead, they had found a woman who knew her own worth. And they had no idea how to handle her. The relationship, I knew, was broken, perhaps irreparably. But as I stood in the quiet of my apartment, a profound sense of peace settled over me. I had lost a family, but I had finally, truly, saved myself. The weeks following the confrontation were a study in silence. My father and brother cut off all contact. They didn't call, they didn't text, and they certainly didn't apologize. My mother would occasionally send me vague, guilt-laden texts like, "Your father is very hurt," or "Ethan is so lost right now. I wish you could all just get along." I responded to each one with a simple, unchanging message. My decision was based on facts and was made to protect my own financial well-being. When they are ready to acknowledge the truth of the situation, I am willing to talk. They never were. The family was fractured. My Aunt Susan became my primary source of information and my staunchest ally. She told me that my email had sent shockwaves through the wider family. At first, my dad had tried to spin the story, telling everyone that I had gotten a big head from my new job and had selfishly pulled my support for Ethan at the last minute out of spite. But his narrative fell apart when Aunt Susan, armed with the email and documents I had sent her, began quietly correcting the record with a few key relatives. She didn't need to be dramatic, she just presented the facts. The predatory loan terms, the ridiculous Busine. SS plan, the history of failure, it all painted a picture that was impossible to deny. The story was no longer Rebecca betrayed her brother, but Mark and Ethan tried to financially ruin Rebecca. Ethan's dream of the gilded fork evaporated overnight. Without my signature, the loan was dead. No other bank would touch him. He apparently spent a month blaming me for everything, spiraling into a deep sulk. He lost the lease on the prime downtown location. According to Aunt Susan, he was now back to living in my parents' basement, reevaluating his options, which was code for playing video games and coming up with his next get-rich-quick scheme. My father, meanwhile, had doubled down on his anger. He couldn't accept that his plan had failed, and more importantly, that he had lost his power over me. Our estrangement was a source of deep shame for him, not because he missed me, but because it made him look bad. In his world, the patriarch was supposed to have absolute authority, and my defiance was an unforgivable act of rebellion. But while their world was shrinking, mine was expanding in ways I had never imagined. Freed from the constant, low-grade stress of my family's expectations, I thrived. At my new job, I poured all my energy and focus into my work. My analytical skills, which I had honed on my brother's disastrous finances, were now being used to manage multi-million-dollar portfolios. I was good at it, really good. Within 6 months, I was promoted, receiving a significant raise and a bonus that was larger than my old annual salary. The first thing I did with that bonus was pay off the last of my student loans. The feeling of making that final payment, of severing the last financial tie to my past and truly owning my education, was one of an incredible lightness. The second thing I did was meet with a financial planner to start aggressively saving for a down payment on a condo. The very future my father and brother had tried to steal from me, the ability to own my own property, to build my own wealth, was now not just a dream, but a tangible goal on a clear timeline. About a year after the incident, I received an unexpected friend request on social media from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. I accepted, and she immediately sent me a message. "Rebecca, I just wanted to say I heard what happened, and I think you are incredibly brave. My dad, your uncle, tried to get me to co-sign a loan for my brother a few years ago, and I caved. It was a disaster, and it set me back financially for years. You did the right thing." Her message was a revelation. It made me realize that this toxic pattern of entitlement and enablement probably ran deeper in my family than I ever knew. My stand hadn't just been for me, it was a break in a generational cycle. I did eventually see my father and brother again at a family funeral 18 months later. They stood on one side of the room and I stood on the other. They both looked older and more tired. Ethan had gained weight and the confident swagger he once had was gone, replaced by a sullen slump. My father just looked bitter. We made eye contact briefly across the room. I gave him a small, neutral nod. He just turned away. There was no anger left in me, only a kind of sad pity. They were trapped in a world of their own making, and I was free. Today, my life is quiet, stable, and entirely my own. I have my own home, a career I love, and a small circle of friends who celebrate my successes without reservation. My relationship with my Aunt Susan is stronger than ever, and my mother and I are slowly, cautiously, rebuilding a connection, though it's one with very firm boundaries. I sometimes think about that graduation party, about the sting of humiliation I felt when my brother made that toast. It was meant to be a moment of mockery, a final put-down to keep me in my place. But in the end, they gave me an incredible gift. They revealed their true intentions so clearly that I had no choice but to finally save myself. My name is Rebecca. My name is on my diploma, my job title, and the deed to my home. And the one place it will never be is on a loan application for a dream that isn't mine.